morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this morning for this important discussion with Father Paolo. Before I get started, I'd like to thank the National Alliance for Syria, the Syrian Expatriates Organization, and Syrian Americans for Democracy for helping us coordinate this effort and bring all of us here together today. Before we move on to the core subject of this press conference, as you may have heard, today was a very busy day in terms of news regarding Syria. Prime Minister of Syria, Al-Jijakli, defected to Jordan. And his family, as we know, his family of 7, is safe and sound, and his escape was instrumental and facilitated by the Free Syrian Army in terms of finding a way to get him out and protect him. He made recently a statement criticizing the terrorist regime of Bashar al-Assad, and he committed himself as a soldier in this revolution to rid Syria of a family regime that has been in rule for the past 40 plus years. We encourage all defections, and we see this as a sign of the end of this regime as we move forward to develop a Syria that is prosperous, grounded in the notion of pluralism and democracy, a nation that is dedicated through the privilege of all members of society, not just the privileges of the elite of society. So now to move on to this press conference and the purpose of this press conference. Over the past 17 months, as we've all borne witness to, ever since the calls of freedom rang out, we have been witnessing a human tragedy in Syria. Devastating response to the calls for freedom from the Assad regime. In the past 17 months, more than 20,000 Syrians have been murdered by this regime. Over 200,000 have been detained. Most of those face torture. Many of them will never be seen again. 2 million have been displaced. And for the first time in the modern history of the state of Syria, we have externally displaced refugees. Refugee Syria was a destination for all those looking for safety. Not today. We also see in the historic and ancient cities of Aleppo and Damascus, the regime is resorting to artillery, shelling civilian neighborhoods, and even using fixed-wing aircrafts and helicopters to collectively punish the population that is up in response and in revolt. From day one as well, since this revolution began, we have seen the sectarian narrative, rhetoric, and tactics being pushed by this regime to exploit the fears of not only those within the Syrian community, but also those around the globe. But this, of course, as we all know, is a distortion of reality. For we all know that over the past 40 years, everyone in Syria, regardless of creed, regardless of sect, background, ethnicity, religion, has suffered at the hands of this regime. We all know that we have, from every aspect of Syrian life, civil society, religion, those who have been tortured, exiled, brutalized, murdered. And we all know at the same time that this is a popular uprising that represents all elements of Syrian society to overthrow the mafia family that has been in charge of this country for the past 40 plus years. This brings us to our guest today, Father Paolo Dall'Oglio of Deir Mar Musa Monastery. Father Paolo is an Italian Jesuit priest who came to Syria over 30 years ago and is truly a son of Syria today. He has spent the last 30 years leading interfaith efforts to bring people together in Syria, and even 30 years ago helped restore the abandoned Deir Mar Musa Monastery and creating a center of dialogue, a center of discussion, and an interfaith community in the heart of the cradle of civilization in Syria, all through the work of Father Paolo. He is also a leading critic of this regime. And his actions and his brave, courageous words led him to being expelled from his beloved Syria about a month and a half ago. So with that said, we'd like to introduce Father Paolo, who will say a few words, and then we will facilitate a Q&A session for all of you to ask anything that you would like. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much for your coming today, your attention. is a big discussion in Syria if we have just a revolution or a civil war or both of them. And myself, I have expressed the fear for the civil war as already starting by June 2011. So more than 1 year ago, I already saw the elements of a coming and growing civil war scenario. With this, I will not say that there is not a revolution as the regime has been trying to say, even using voices of religious leaders, both Muslims and Christians. In fact, the version of the regime is there is nothing else than terrorism on the ground and the danger of a Syrian Islamist state. This should be the project backed by a conspiracy of everybody else than Syria, the south of Lebanon, south of Iraq and Iran, plus Russia and some friends around. The revolution is there. I have seen the revolution. I have seen the boys of the revolution, the young people, incredible courage, and with the strong will from the beginning to have it non-violent like other Arabic countries, fully related to the Arabic Spring in all the Arabic nation. And those people are related to the group of opposition that have been active in the last 40 years. And from this point of view, it's very clear that the Syrian opposition is not sectarian. We have Christians that have been jailed, we have Alawites have been jailed, Druze people have been jailed, Kurdish people have been jailed, obviously Sunni and others. So those who have been against the regime are of all kind of Syrians. But nevertheless, it's true that the regime has been trying to root his power on a solidarity of minorities, taken into their attitude of backing the regime because of the fears of the growing protagonist, the Muslim political subject in the Middle East. So we have a real revolution that was obliged to defend itself. I'm a Catholic priest, so I have had all kinds of anguishes about the use of violence during this revolution. I always encourage those who go ahead with non-violent attitude to stay on this, because we need this today and tomorrow. But nevertheless, I have to recognize with the official catechism of the Catholic Church that the right of the people to defend themselves is sometimes a real duty. And that the youth have been asked to fire against their own people, has been obliged to do the opposite and defend their people. There is extremists on the ground, yes. They were there before. You know that Syria sent Syrian Muslim extremists to fight in Iraq. And they've been using the Muslim extremism in Lebanon, so nothing new on the ground. And as much as the international irresponsibility, the lack of responsibility of the international community stay in that way, the floor is open for all kind of little groups to come in and act on their own agenda that is not democracy, pluralism, and tolerance. They have another agenda. I wrote in an open letter to Kofi Annan in May, I didn't get any answer, that yes, we have already and we will have more an issue of Islamist extremism on the ground, and the new Syria will be obliged to act, perhaps with the help of the United Nations agencies, to bring back those youth in an entire rehabilitation for social correct life. We don't need Guantanamos, we need rehabilitation. Have been asking for more than 1 year that the United Nations will offer assistance to the Syrian people through a massive presence of pacifist, non-violent peacekeepers. Then today, this is not realistic anymore. We are now at a point where the disaster already happened. Syria is to be rebuilt. We have the battle of Damascus and Halab and Aleppo ongoing. The state, this puppet state, this curtain state that protects the regime real state that is used by the family cupola, this state is falling apart. But this does not mean that the regime logic will just be defeated in next days. They hope to take back the 2 biggest towns. They will not be able, because already the organization of the opposition is so diffused on the territory that this will not be possible, at least not entirely possible. But we fear, many in Syria are afraid that the regime will fall, but the civil war will go ahead. We have a Kurdish issue, and we have a west of Syria issue, from the Oronte River until the sea. And if you look the geography of the massacres, you will find it mainly on the Oronte River line. How to avoid that the civil populations will be involved in a long-lasting civil war? Probably we are at a point that Russia is seeing that the friend regime is lost, and a solution should be looked upon. And the risk in the next weeks is then is the Syrian revolution that will not be ready to have any United Nations forces coming in. It is now the moment to have a new diplomatic initiative. I asked the Foreign Minister of Canada that I saw in Ottawa some days ago to have a new diplomatic initiative in order to ask both sides, the NATO and the Russian group, to decide that Syria will stay or become neutral. We want to have a Syria having a political Arabic agenda and not belonging to the United States or to Russia. Syria has its own political priorities. And those are related to the Arabic Spring and the new Arabic League that is very different from the one before before the Spring. Before the Spring we had an association regime of regimes. And the Arab League was a syndicate of regimes. Now it is an association of free nation in the pattern of a communality, an Arabic communality. This is the future of Syria. So, Syria should be neutral in this awful civil war happening between Shiite people and Sunni people. We have this in Lebanon, we have this in Iraq, we have this pitifully in Bahrain. This civil war between Sunni and Shiite should be stopped. And Syria will not side. She will be the place of reconciliation. So now we need a new diplomatic initiative to ask everybody to agree that we need a neutral Syria, and we need now UN forces, not the UN permission for Western forces, but real UN forces coming to separate the civilians that are fighting each other. And today is the Sunni people that are massacred by the Shabiha, you know, the militias of the regime. Tomorrow, the United Nations will protect the families of the Shabiha. And the presence of the United Nations forces on the ground at the falling of the regime will help the Syrian people to have a deal of negotiation, to have a constitution that will guarantee rights for all the components of this nation. The geographical components, like the Kurdish or the Alawites or the Bedouins, and the ideological or religious belongings, like the Christian, like the Druze, like the Kurdish all over the country. So we have two issues. Personally, I am for a parliamentarian democracy and not for a presidential democracy, because the parliamentarian democracy will, in a more easy way, help to have this democracy of consensus that is probably the best solution for the country and the best model for the region. And this is the end of my speech here in front of you. I thank you. The last sentence is that if we are able to bring back the ideal model of the Arabic town, the base of the Arabic Islamic civilization, where Muslims, Christians, and Jews were able to live in the same town friendly and in an harmonic way, offering to the Mediterranean Sea a new occasion of a flourishing civilization. If you are able to bring back this model, this will allow us to think about the Middle East as a place of harmony and consensus. And I'm thinking obviously about the Palestinian-Israeli issue. So if we go with a model of harmony and reconciliation in Syria, probably this will have a domino effect in the region. The contrary will have a completely opposite effect. So it is essential for the United Nations to act now.
Thank you very much, Father Paolo. I ask if there's any questions from the floor, to raise your hand, just introduce yourself. If you have a question in another language, we'd appreciate if you say it in the language of preference and also in English, just for all those to understand. Father Paolo speaks many languages and so can respond appropriately. Please, hand in the back.
Thank you. My name is Shawna. Father Paolo, you arrived to Syria not too long after the 1980s massacre in Hama, where the government took out, they say, anywhere between 20 and 80,000 people. Of course, the numbers have to be confirmed. And they claimed it was to rid the country of any Islamist and Muslim Brotherhood influence. What do you think of that? Do you think that has anything to do with what happened today? Why do you think that went unnoticed and this isn't?
The Muslim Brotherhood is one protagonist of this Syrian revolution. It's been destroyed physically by the massacres of 1982. And from that time till now, this protagonist of the political Islam have had an important evolution in the direction of mature civil democracy. So today, the Muslim Brothers, they don't have a project of immediate Muslim state, but a state for Muslims. And they have somehow adopted in their political agendas a project that looks more like the Turkish way than the Saudi one, or the Iranian one.
So not extremists.
It's not an issue of extremism, it's an issue of model. The Iranian one is that there is a republic with a group of clerks that are leading the republic on the base of religious law. The other project is a monarchy that go with the literalist Muslim law. So those two models does not look at all being the one adopted by the Muslim Brothers, that goes more on a democracy where the Muslims feel good, because it is not a secularism, it is a civil society with a civil democracy that is, let's say, pious more than religious.
Hi, it's Valeria from San News Agency, the Italian one. And my question is, like, Kofi Annan resigned a couple of days ago, and the UN mission will expire on the next August 19th. So, in your opinion, which is the future of the diplomacy on the ground, and it is real possible that the UN will have a key role on the next days in Syria?
If the UN will not have a key role, the international community will assume responsibility for the massacres that will happen. It is not acceptable today to watch and see and just trying to assist the civilians from outside, from the neighbor countries, especially in this case when the civil conflict will certainly expand to Lebanon and make things more difficult in Iraq and elsewhere. So I cannot imagine that the UN will not assume responsibility for the situation. And I assume that before the end of the 30 days, extra days for the Annan initiative, the UN be able to deliberate both in the Security Council on the base of a new round of diplomacy for stopping the fight, having a ceasefire, having the regime out of power, and creating the condition for constitutional negotiation in a satisfactory and consensual way.
In the back?
Yeah, sure. Sure. Matthew Lee, Inner City Press. I wanted to ask you, you were saying that there should be some diplomatic outreach to both, you said Russia and NATO. But I wonder what you think of the role of Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Obviously, there's Iran on the other side, but what do you think? I mean, is this really just Russia versus the United States, or what are the goals of Saudi Arabia and Qatar in at least reportedly arming the opposition, and what do you think of that as a gesture?
These kind of realities are complex. The kind of reaction of USA, for example, is paralyzed by the complexity of the issue and the internal attitude of the USA, the United States of America, where probably also the feelings of Israel, very worried for the future of Syria, obviously, are able to paralyze a pre-election presidency of this country where we are now. It is possible even that some people are thinking that a long-lasting civil war in Syria is in their interests. That having our enemies fighting each other is the cheapest way to fight them. It is possible that some extremist Sunni sides want to have Iran heavily bitten, heavily fought in Syria itself. To have a defeat of Iran in Syria. It is certainly part of the program of the Saudis, for example, but also of people that now are making so much pressure on Iran for nuclear reason, and to have them defeated in Syria could be part of the project. On the opposite side, Iran is fighting back this, and all those projects and agenda are a tragedy for the Syrian people. So the Syrian people ask everybody to please come and help, not come and play your games on our ground. But never, in the same time, we have to recognize that the Syrian Free Army is in need of weapons. Otherwise, they'll be massacred by the Shabihat and the regime forces. So they take the weapons where they are. But the Syrian army, Free Army, is working with weapons from all over the world, if possible, but for their own agenda, not for the people giving the weapons itself.
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question in French.
Vous êtes bienvenue, madame.
Merci. J'ai l'impression que le problème, ce n'est pas seulement Bachar, son départ, voire sa mort, mais aussi celui de toute une communauté, les Alaouites, qui se battront probablement jusqu'au dernier d'entre eux pour ne pas retomber dans l'état où ils étaient avant, de paria opprimés. Qu'est-ce que vous en pensez? Est-ce que ce n'est pas ça comment dire, l'idée de massacre de masse qui se profile à l'horizon?
Vous me donnez la permission de reprendre en anglais? Non, vous préférez que je parle en français?
Non,
donc je vais en français, ça va. Parlons des Alaouites en français et après je répéterai un peu en anglais. Donc, voyez, la communauté alaouite a été liée au régime mais n'est pas la même chose que le régime. Il y a des alaouites qui sont contre le régime et qui ont souffert de la répression du régime. En plus, les alaouites sont aussi une complexité tribale, pour ainsi dire, et ils ne sont pas tous avec le clan des Assad. Cela dit, c'est un fait, un danger réel. Au début de la révolution, quand les sunnites de l'Ataki, sachant que si les choses n'allaient pas vite et jusqu'au fond, ils auraient été jetés à la mer par les alaouites des collines et des montagnes environnantes, et les sunnites se sont levés pour la révolution, c'est le régime de Assad qui a empêché les paysans en armes de descendre des collines et faire un massacre des sunnites de la ville. Donc le régime était très conscient du fait qu'on risquait immédiatement de perdre la belle image de la Syrie pour tout le monde et de devenir immédiatement le champ d'une guerre civile à caractère ethnique ou confessionnel. Le risque est effectif. Il faudra vraiment travailler à une constitution syrienne à même de protéger le mosaïque magnifique de la société syrienne elle-même. Cela demande maintenant un niveau de responsabilité du côté de ceux qui sont en train de vaincre et qui sont en majorité sunnites par rapport au futur de la nation telle qu'elle. C'est pour cela que je demande l'assistance de la société internationale pour aider les meilleurs à voir le dessus. Say this in English quickly. It is a fact that the Alawite community is afraid. They are not all with the regime. I think that one day the criminal of the regime will be handled by the Alawite community to the criminal court, International Criminal Court of Law, like what happened in Serbia. This will happen if the community will be protected. The hills and the people who are living with the Alawites that are also Christian in the valleys of the west, on the mountain of west of Syria. So we need now a clear responsibility in this sense from the United Nations in order to help the best of the Syrian revolution to win the play and not the worst.
We had this gentleman right here.
Yes, hi, Dan Brody, Voice of America. What would you say right now is the most dangerous thing facing Syrians today?
Two things. One is to have the regime still backed by Russia and Iran and fighting, taking a town, losing it, taking again. You know, and so to have thousands of dead people, more than what we have already, and hundreds of thousands of displaced. And we have until now 2 million of people that are not anymore in their homes, and we risk to have much more. So this is the danger now. A step further, the danger is to have a long-lasting civil war in West Syria after the falling of the regime, with a project of dividing Syria. There's people that says there is oil and gas on the shore of Syria, and the water can be sold by the west of Syria to other regions, and so it could be a self-sustaining state, but it will not able to be self-sustainable from the cultural point of view, and certainly also from the economic and social point of view. So we believe in one Syria, and we will act in this direction. To divide all the region in little confessional countries is not a civilizational project. It is a defeat for civilization in the east of the Mediterranean, the west of Asia.
This gentleman,
Can you talk about the Christian community and what they're facing and if they're finally starting to abandon the Assad regime?
The second part
If
of your
they're finally
sentence.
starting to abandon the Assad regime.
Yeah. The Christians are a minority in Syria already from centuries. So they have a minority attitude. Is to be protected by the power, by sultan, by the king, by the mandate, by the one in power. This traditional attitude, especially for the leaders, goes with a capacity of the power to use as a propaganda mean the leaders of the minority community, first the Christian, and I would say more than anybody else, the Christian. So many Christians has been against the regime. In the qualities of leftist people, in the qualities of people for human rights, actors, so many Christians, and I would say a majority of elevated, having studying Syrians, young students, Syrian students, and youth with good education. They are for the change, they are for democracy. They cannot go anymore with such an archaic regime. They ask for the change, but nevertheless they are still afraid of the Muslim actor. In the past, from the time of the Prophet Muhammad, upon him peace, and his community, the Christians were protected by the Muslim authority. Now it is the responsibility of the Muslims as a democratic society to offer equality and brotherhood and citizenship and rights to the minorities. It is up to the Muslim and not to the Muslim authority. It is to the Muslim society, civil society, to choose to keep the Christian community. The fact today is that many Christians are going. It's not only now. In the 40 past years of Syrian regime, many Christians left the country for different reasons. So it was not the paradise of Christians. But now the responsibility is handed to the society, mainly Muslim, to decide democratically to keep a healthy, participative, positive Christian community. And then it's up to the Christian to decide to stay and to act for common Syria, for one Syria. What we have been saying in all those meetings is 1, 1, 1. The Syrian people is one. We speak to them. Sarah is remembering me to just to example. It was a Christian named Al-Jijakli. He was in the United States as a filmmaker, and then he came back to his home country, Syria, to fight with the revolution. And he was killed in Homs. The service for his funeral was not possible in Damascus because the state forbid it, and the priests were obliged to close the church. And I received those youths in my place, crying and mourning for their friend. And it is an image that is very strong in my mind. There was ladies, black dressed, Alawites, Christians, and Muslim Sunni, crying together for their friend. In one group of women crying together is such an important image of the real deep Syria. And I have heard that in Yabrud, a village, a town, on the Kalamun in between Homs and Damascus. The Christian that has always done that traditionally in Ramadan. Now they had a iftar, a breakfast of Ramadan in the evening, with the Muslim neighbors, offering to the Muslim neighbors a breakfast in the church, having the flag of the new Syria.
Please.
I have two questions, and my name is Maya. I'm from the International Business Times. My first question is, how much longer do you think Assad is going to last? And my second is, if and when the rebels take over, do you see Syria as continuing to be a haven for religious tolerance, or do you think that's going to change?
First, although a priest, I don't work as a prophet, at least not full time. But the elements for that things are accelerating, this is evident to all of us. And I think that in coming weeks, the situation of Mr. Bashar al-Assad will come to a stop point. He will not be able anymore to replace the people leading his puppet government. And so far, this puppet state will fall, and the regime itself will fall. Will he go out of Syria, or will he be fighting in Damascus to the end in a Gaddafi scenario that I don't wish to him, and I don't wish to the revolution? This is the worst scenario possible for the dignity of Syria and Syrians. Will he go to Latakia? We had reports that his wife bought furniture for the palace of Latakia for 250,000 sterling. And so perhaps they are planning that in order to have the Alawite Syria. So which scenario will come in? I think that we should ask Mr. Putin, because it's really in his hands to offer a harbor to Mr. Assad and the regime circle, a safe place in Russia. And this was proposed several times by the president of Tunisia. And this would be the best option for the Russians, to be faithful to their friendship and at the same time to be faithful and friendly with Syria and the Syrian revolution, finally. But if Russia goes with the idea of splitting Syria, then we will see Mr. Assad going to Latakia.
I'm Harry Kundakjian, a photographer, and I started photography in Lebanon. I have covered Syria extensively. I remember clearly when I photographed Hafez al-Assad when he was a young pilot in 1950 in Aleppo, being trained with the MiG-17 planes, which were, one of them was enlarged because he's a tall guy. But since then, I remember also covering Damascus, Baladi's streets when he took over. Like him, like Al-Jijakli, like others, all of them. It hurts me to feel like this because I was born in Aleppo, but grew up in Lebanon. I'm a simple believer in God, like almost all of us. I do not believe Christian, Muslim, Alawite split thought. It is a shame. It has been created so that we follow certain elements. Now, it is said that the bomb that killed some of the top leaders in Syria take the power away from Bashar and be himself the president or the dictator or whatever. And that now Bashar's wife, being British born, is being insulted in England as a whatever name you want to use. Is it true that she is really influencing Bashar to continue this massacre of his own people? I mean, I'm mixed up. I don't know what to ask.
I don't have any confidential information about the family life of Mr. Bashar, so I'll not be able to speculate on your hypothesis. We hoped that she will have on him a good influence to push him toward the passage of Syria to democracy. So many in Syria, a large majority of people, hoped that Syria will be spared for the bloodbath and will have a peaceful translation and mutation into democracy with the leadership of Mr. Bashar al-Assad and the help of his wife that's been working for 10 years on civil society, non-governmental organization for development. And so some of us, me in the number, we had kind of hope that she will have a positive role, being she is Sunni, also to have this harmony in the family. What to say now when the town of the family of Mrs. Asma al-Assad has been destroyed by the regime? I don't think she is pushing anything. I think that she is not at the level of the historical responsibility that she should have faced. That just out of real understanding of what's going on the ground.
One small
They have believed their myth. They have created a myth and have believed it. It's too late.
It's the perpetuation of a mafia regime, which is different than any other entity or government that had existed in Syria prior to the takeover by this family 40 plus years ago. And that's an important thing to put into even historical context within the realities of Syrian history. There's a mafia family regime that has used Syria as their resource, as their pool to further their interests and fatten their own personal pockets as a regime, whether it be the mother-in-law, the wife, the brother, whoever. That is our perspective. One question here and then in the back.
Larry Freund, quickly, could you tell us why you did originally go to Syria?
Yeah.
And what, as a follow-up to that, what you plan on doing in whatever scenario you would open?
I was born in Rome, 1954. I'm a Jesuit by 1975. And very quickly I felt a vocation for serving Christian Islamic harmony building. Christian Islamic dialogue, Christian Islamic harmony building. And for this purpose I came to Beirut 1977 to study Arabic. And then 1980 in Damascus studying Islam. I still have friends, Muslim friends that are now also very active in the revolution. And then I discovered the monastery in 1982. It was not unknown, but was abandoned, and for me was the right place to try to embody the kind of priorities I want to serve in my life. I'm kicked now out. I consider myself homeless until I go back, and this will be soon, inshallah. And I will go back to my responsibilities, but somehow I feel that I wish to act with the people of Syria for reconciliation. My aim now is the harmony of these people for a friendly Syria.
We'll allow for a couple more questions, just want to make sure. All the way in the back and then yourself.
Thank you. Joanna Lucy again with the Wall Street Journal. Father, half a century ago, before Hafiz
a real hope that the new democratic Syria will bring back the dispersed assets and capacities of all those Syrians who have been obliged to leave the country because of dictatorship. But nevertheless, I think that there is a dispersed treasure of capacities that will not be able to be gathered back again. And I don't have big hopes for the role of the Christians in coming Syria, but I do have a real deep hope that the rest of the Christians that will stay will be happy to stay. There was the ancient bishop of Aleppo, very cultivated person, Monsignor Edelby, loved by everybody. He was often says, it's not important to have many Christians or few Christians, but to have them happy to be here and to be neighbor of the Muslims.
You have a question?
You talked a lot about the UN and saying that that is the most important solution, not necessarily separate international countries, but the UN's forces and the UN diplomacy. Do you think that is the only solution, and if not, what are other options that you see?
This is the only good solution I see. I do not think, because everybody's been speaking for 1 year, I do not think that USA is ready to go in war for Syria. Not from heaven in the way of Libya, and certainly not on the ground. But in both cases, this will not help the unity of Syria. We will have an Afghani or an Iraqi scenario that is not suitable at all. So France is willing to do something, ready to go, but also in this case, I don't think we'll be able to do it without any green light from the United Nations. So which shape will take the United Nations initiative? I'm not that an expert for that, but I hope that really will be United Nations based and based on this idea of protecting the society, stopping the fight, and opening the floor for constitutional negotiation.
Question over here.
Yes, my name is Jijakli, Samir Jijakli. Father Paolo of Syria, is there a role for you in ameliorating some of the positions we have heard in the last few months from the Vatican?
I can say that I'm not able to ameliorate the position of the Vatican because they are quite good. The Pope has spoken 4 times directly about the Syrian issue and always asking that the wishes and needs of Syrians for social development, and let's say he didn't use the name democracy, but it was very clear in his attitude that the wishes of the Syria will be welcomed with the help of the international society, also for the security of the region. So it's a very clear statement that's been repeated 4 times in different ways. And a representative of the Vatican has been present in all the Friends of Syria meeting in Tunis, Istanbul, and France. So, and in Istanbul, he also had a good speech in favor of the Syrian people. So I will not say this. Another thing is what important Catholic representatives, bishops or others have been saying about the Syrian issue in the last month. This is something else. Some of them has been very much with the regime, and I have explained already why. There is an attitude of submission and probably political miscalculation. Probably political miscalculation. They can't believe that democracy is coming because they are not so democratic ideologically. The issue is democratic culture. has not been very much diffused in some part of the Catholic Church. So we have perhaps hoped to have more democracy in the church, and so we will have more democratic Christian in the society.
Well, thank you very
Can I add one little question?
I think we're closing the floor because we were way over.
I will speak to you afterwards.
We have time afterwards to speak, but I just want to thank all members of the media for coming out today. On behalf of the National Alliance for Syria, Syrian Expatriates Organization, and Syrian Americans for Democracy, we'd like to also thank Father Paolo for being with us today to provide with us his perspective. Please pray for Syria. Understand that this is a challenge, and this revolution is grounded in challenging the status quo family mafia that has ruled the country for 40 years. We want to ensure that we end up with a Syria that is grounded in dignity, respect, value for human life, and a nation that is grounded not in sectarian privilege, but a nation that is grounded in equality for all its citizens. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.